So I want to make a video about one of my students' latest fights. His name is Alex, is the guy on the bottom here, and you can see him playing guard. I want to break down a few of his a few moments throughout this competition that I thought were particularly interesting. So number one, he plays a lot of inside guards. So he plays a lot of butterfly guards and half butterfly guards. And he's a very good leg locker, and he's very good at elevating his opponents and entering into their legs and kind of spinning underneath. I think this particular fight is very interesting because you can see one of the problems that he's having that is not necessarily related to a lack of skill on his side, but rather it's almost like an intrinsic issue with inside guards. So we're talking about guards in which both of your feet are inside the legs of your partner. Basically, you have sort of double inside position with your feet. Mostly butterfly and half butterfly guards. You can see him here playing this inside guard, that butterfly guard here, trying to get an underhook here on the right side, and he kind of collapses down to half butterfly, and he tries to get some sort of far side arm, some sort of arm saddle or something of that sort, which then doesn't really work because his partner brings his left arm in this case away, kind of yanks the arm out. And Alex is really good at working with this dilemma. So whenever you take one arm away, he's very good at catching the other one, right? So this principle, or what Danaher calls disappearing limbs. So whenever you deny one limb, something else will always appear. In this case, Alex moves from his opponent's left arm to his opponent's right arm. You can see him here trying to get an underhook here, right? And he does this kind of beautiful arm drag from here, extracts the leg from the butterfly hook and starts coming on top, right? It's a beautifully executed arm drag, really sort of a textbook arm drag from half butterfly, has an near side shoulder. Both of his opponent's hands are on the ground, which is, I think, one of the most and least discussed things when it comes to arm drags, because obviously now his opponent is bearing weight on his hands, so his ability to sort of cut the elbow through and catch the far hip is very limited. And now Alex is going to go for the far hip, and now he's going to start building height and chasing the back. Of course, his opponent knows this and does a very common reaction, which is bringing the hips to the floor and conceding bottom position. I would have liked to see Alex maybe taking more advantage of this defensive measure and just already going into maybe some sort of high tripod or high body lock sequences, taking advantage of the fact that you already had kind of dominated and pushed the right leg of his opponent inside his legs. So he could have already gone into some body lock exchange here, which he kind of went, but it kind of got a little bit of gun shy here. And eventually he let go of the underhook and eventually sits back, ends up sitting back onto the legs. But what I want to highlight here is something that's going to happen in a few seconds, which is him standing in the legs. Doesn't quite work. This is a submission only, so there's no points really. And tries to heist. His opponent tries to keep him down, and here he goes again into that butterfly guard that he likes so much. Now, this is one of the problems that you always face from half butterfly or butterfly for that matters. Whenever you already hit some successful position on your opponent, namely the fact they're going to be very cagey and very reluctant to engage in your guard. And this is something that Gordon talks a lot about, especially in his breakdown of his match with Buchecha back in the days, I think it was a super fight in ADCC back in the days, in which he basically got immediately, I think it was a shoulder crunch, if I remember correctly, mounted immediately in the first few minutes of the match, and then basically sort of started, kind of chasing Buchecha throughout the rest of the match, basically, because Buchecha was very cagey and reluctant to engage in his guard. And this will always be an issue whenever you hit a position from an inside guard, and then you, for whatever reason, you end up playing an inside guard, and your opponent is like, well, not again, not anymore. And so you can see him now. His opponent is trying again this little leg weave, but is extremely, extremely cagey. And you can see here it goes for an arm drag again, doesn't really work. Now he tries to go for a far side arm drag, also doesn't really work. And you can see here, kind of, his top player barely tries to engage. You see now he goes for this far side underhook, but because his opponent is not really engaging, it's actually very hard to get anything done. You see the same arm drag motion extracting this leg that worked, a minute ago, now is not working anymore, because for that to work, you need a little bit of forward engagement. And there you go, like a lot of sort of caginess. There's not much to say. Now the match now starts changing pace, but this is just something that I wanted to highlight because it's going to happen to everybody that hits any sort of sweep and then ends up in bottom position again, and then just keeps playing exclusively inside cards. So butterfly and half butterfly. For a more strategic perspective, what you should be doing in a situation like that, after your opponent is sort of starting being very reluctant to engage, is to switch from a fully inside guard to maybe an outside guard or inside outside guard. For example, for Alex now, strategically would have made more sense to switch from half butterfly, for example, to half guard, to classic knee shield, in which at least because you have that lock on the hip, at least you're able to generate kind of more off balance in many directions, or even close guard, the situations in which you literally have your legs wrapped around your opponent. Keeping a double inside guard, as in 2 feet on the inside, against a cagey opponent, you're never going to be able to get anything done unless your partner is really, really trying to engage, which, obviously that will depend on, the points, how much time there is left to do. But just from a strategic perspective, I think I wish I could have seen Alex here switching to a knee shield, for example, or a close guard. I think he would have done himself a favor doing that from a strategic perspective. So another moment that I found quite interesting is this half butterfly exchange that you can see here. And I think you can really see the application of a principle that has to do with butterfly hooks and top head and arms. And this is something, again, that Gordon talks about, and I think it's particularly insightful. You can see here at play, Gordon basically says, look, if I am in a situation in which I'm in half guard chest to chest, and I have a top head and arm, and I want to go to a high tripod, right? If my partner gets a butterfly hook in before I go to a high tripod, then I wouldn't go to a high tripod. I would switch to just a cross space and kind of posting with the far hand on the ground. If, on the other hand, my partner gets a butterfly hook in when I am already a top head and arm, already in a high tripod situation, then I would just keep my high tripod situation and I would just start leg pommeling. You can see the application of this principle quite well here, because you can see in this match, Alex from bottom tries to get an overhook here. I don't know how deliberately he gives up this chest-to-chest kind of top head and arm, but you can see here quite clearly he already has a butterfly hook inside, and I don't know whether he did this on purpose or not, but the fact is that his opponent is not in a high tripod situation, has a top head and arm, but is not in a high tripod situation, and Alex already has a butterfly hook in. And you can see now his opponent tries to go in a high tripod situation. You see, kind of slightly start bringing his head to the ground and he hips up. And you can see it doesn't quite work. Alex manages to kind of recover to the near side and throws this leg up and eventually goes into his rubber guard game, right? Again, I think this is a perfect application of something that we talked a lot about in classes, namely this idea that if you already have a high tripod, then sure, it doesn't matter if your partner throws a butterfly hook in. But if your partner already has a butterfly hook in and you go to a high tripod, you might lose the position entirely. And I think this is a perfect example in which you can see this. Now, obviously, he elected from bottom a strategy that, it's very suited to his game and to his sort of physiology. Is very lot of internal rotation with the knee, and so he can just go into this rubber guard game. But I think the point still stands, even if you use the butterfly hook just to start off balancing your opponent and just simply recovering guard. Another great sequence that I thought it was particularly inspiring because I think it exemplifies a dilemma that you really see in people that have a certain understanding of jiu-jitsu, especially I would say in the no-gi scene, although I know that I'm gonna get absolutely murdered for this, but I would say that it tends to be a dilemma more common in the no-gi scene than it is in the gi scene. I'm gonna explain why in a second. Namely, switching, sort of constant switching between upper body and lower body attacks and framing them as a dilemma. You can see here very nicely. So we start in a very classic close guard scenario, right? This guy stands up, and then Alex here from bottom starts going in almost like a one-on-one armbar, right? From close guard. He tries one with this, I think they call it butterfly sweep. Maybe, I don't know. You see, he tries one, he doesn't quite get the angle right, and so his opponent is able to post. And instead of sort of giving up, he's like, wait a second, I think I have a good bite on the leg, I have a good bite on his upper body. Wait a second, let me try again. So he goes again, now he dominates the elbow, so it's like, well, you're not posting with that anymore. And now he goes a little bit deeper, swinging his head sort of in between, almost underneath his partner's hips, right? And here we are. Now, he could have gotten an armbar from here, probably. The mechanics were a bit off. I think I would have liked to see him just sort of settling the hips down and trying to maybe collect both legs and land already in an armbar. But hey, shit happens. Eventually his opponent here manages to free the leg, right? And I think where the sequence starts becoming very interesting is that he says, well, you did deny me the upper body here, right? You sort of aggressively pulled the arm away from my bite, except that came with a very high cost, namely the fact that now the legs are exposed, right? And he uses this to start attacking the leg. Here we go. Now he's like, well, now the legs are there, I can start going into all sorts of heel hooks and stuff. Obviously he's a very skilled leg locker, and it's like, well, actually, maybe I might get to suck this knee back in and maybe even get in some sort of backside 50-50 or some sort of backside heel hooks, which obviously very, 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 very hard to defend because his opponent would be carrying weight on the hands and he couldn't be hand fighting and so on and so forth. And so it's like, actually, you know what? I don't really get this heel hook exposure because my opponent's the knee line is way too far away for me to be able to drag the knee back and start actually attacking the heel. And so you know what I'm going to do? You are denying me the knee line, as in you're pulling your lower body away from me. But again, that's going to come at a cost. And so what he does is he switches back to the upper body and starts climbing sort of from the bottom up, and it starts climbing all the way to the hip. and eventually now he got sort of a mild upper body bite, and now his whole thing is either obviously start climbing further back. His opponent realizes that he's looking for chest to back, and so he does this fairly sensible thing, especially in a no points environment. Basically brings the back to the ground, concedes the sweep, but doesn't necessarily mean anything in a no points competition. There you go, back on the ground. Now there's no more back exposure, and Alex manages to crawl up and dominate the upper body to solidify some sort of pin. Now again, he doesn't want to get pinned, and so turns again, and Alex was like, well, if you deny me chest to chest, I guess I'm going to have to take chest to back instead. And so now you can see them here in a turtle exchange. Okay, so again, I think this is a very inspiring sequence, because you can see how he started with an upper body attack, switched back to the legs. The reason why I said in the Nogi scene the strategy is more prominent is because obviously the amount of leg attacks that you can have in Nogi is just more, just from a sheer the sheer amount of leg locks that you have is just bigger. And so switches back the leg, opponent denies the legs, start crawling back up, sort of climbing the body to get a chest to back. So basically an upper body grip. Opponent denies it, brings the back to the floor. Alex goes for chest to chest. Opponent denies that again, and Alex takes again a chest to back. So very inspiring sequence. All in all, I think that we all have something to learn from this.